Hi guys, welcome to another Australian Football Services podcast. I'm Anel as always, today joined by a very special guest. We've got Bruno Costa, who is the head scout of San Jose Earthquakes and is a man of massive amounts of experience in the scouting sector, having worked with quite a few Brazilian players, Neymar being one of the ones in particular who most people will be familiar with. So Bruno, thank you very much for your time today.
Oh, my pleasure. I know it's always good to talk to you guys. It's a good afternoon in Australia and then good night here in California. So nice to talk to you.
Beautiful. Bruno, for those who might not be familiar with yourself, can you give us a little bit of background about yourself?
Yes, I'm from Brazil, as you said, and I came to America for the first time. I was 15 years old. I got a scholarship to play on an academy back in Florida. After that, I got a scholarship to move to college, and I played 1 year of college soccer for Florida International University in Miami. But the dream to become a professional player spoke a little bit higher. So I moved back to Brazil at 21 years old. Unfortunately, I got a bad injury, and I had to kind of give up of playing at such an early age. But the good thing about it is I moved to Rio de Janeiro. I had a chance to finish my degree in sports management, and I'm only 21 years old. I started working for the Brazilian Federation. So I became a manager of football operations at such a younger age for the Brazil youth national teams, where I had the opportunity to go over between 2001 and 2007, go over all the management part, and also already start doing some kind of scouting with the head coach. Brazil won the U20 and U17 World Cup in 2003. That was the first time ever that a nation won both youth World Cups at the same year. So it was a very amazing experience for me. At only 23 years old, be able to participate in those two titles. In 2007, I moved to Fluminense, one of the top clubs in Brazil, to be the academy director for the club, and also the assistant sporting director for BRUNCO. Whoever knows BRUNCO is a former left back for the Brazil national team. So I had the pleasure to work with BRUNCO in the national team and also in Fluminense. I spent 4 years in the club. We had one of the top academies in Brazil, and we also back then won the Brazilian Cup and the Brazilian League after 20 plus years. And also Fluminense reached the Libertadores Cup final for the first time ever. So we also sold more than $80 million in players during those 4 years. So it was a very amazing experience for me. In 2011, I moved to Figueirense. Figueirense is today on third division in Brazil, but back then we were in first division. Also as an academy director, Figueirense is the club that Roberto Firmino was developed, and also Felipe Luis, left back that played for Atlético de Madrid. In 2012, I received an invitation to go back for the Brazil Federation to become the chief scout for the youth national teams. So those were 4 amazing years, working and developing, all the top young players in the Brazil national team. I had the pleasure to work with on this second stint. On the first stint, I had the pleasure to work with Neymar, Coutinho, Marcelo, William, David Luiz, and Thiago Silva in Fluminense, all those players. In my second stint in the federation, Gabriel Jesus, who is now one of the top players for Manchester City. Yeah. So it was 4 years of a very good experience. But the desire to come back to America, a place that I already knew, now that was already part of my history, spoke bigger. And in 2016, the Brazilian Ronaldo, we joke that the real Ronaldo, yeah. Ronaldo had a share in one club in America called Fort Lauderdale Strikers. He was one of the owners. I got an invitation to become the sporting director for this club in 2016. The club played the second division in US, the North American Soccer League. So I came to America in 2016, came back. I was in Fort Lauderdale for 1 year, and in the beginning of 2017, I received the invitation from Jesse Fioranelli, who was our former sporting director,
Mhm.
to come to the San Jose Earthquakes and become the head of scouting and recruitment for the club. So it's my 6 years, enter my 6th year in the club.
Wow.
It's been an amazing experience, working for one of the most traditional clubs in the league.
Yeah.
The first MLS game in 1996 was played in San Jose, California, between the San Jose Earthquakes and the DC United. Back then was called San Jose Clash.
Yeah.
But it's just an amazing opportunity for me to be in this club for such a long time and be able to participate in an amazing project.
Absolutely. As we mentioned, massive amounts of experience there, and obviously having worked with swaths of different talented players, some who have gone on to play for their national team. I mean, that's a massive thing there. So, given your experience in the field, what makes for a good or effective scout? And then secondly, how important are scouts overall to the success of a club?
I think they're fundamental, right? And myself, I was able to work in three different roles. They're very linked to each other, right? A chief scout, academy director, and also sporting director. You got to know about players. You got to know about academy. You got to know about players development, players ID, identification. So I was very fortunate to be born in Brazil, where football is not a game, it's a religion for us. Yeah. And also at such a younger age, be able to be surrounded by so many good professionals and also some of the best players in the world. At only 21 years old, be able to work at the Brazil youth national teams. I had a chance, to be on ground watching all those talents come in the pipeline. So I was able to create also a benchmarking with myself, what it takes to succeed and why a lot of good players also didn't succeed. Mm-hmm. So passion, there was no time for me. There was no Sunday. There was no Saturday. I was 24/7 engaged and involved on what I loved. And I joke with my wife when I met her. I kind of show her a little soccer ball, and I told her this was the most important thing for us. And that's pretty much what it is, right? You gotta be engaged and involved and be able to understanding at what does it take for 11 years old to succeed at 12 years old, 13, 14, 15, and then you start watching so many players coming in the pipeline. You start to creating your own benchmarking on players, and then when you put all those experience together, hours and hours of games, be able to participate in also in U15 South American Championship, U17, U20, watch the Brazilian leagues, traveling with the Brazil national team all over the world to watch different nations, different players' profile. When you start bringing all of those information together, makes you kind of calibrate your eyes and be able to understand what does it take for a player to succeed and also to make for the next level.
Sure. Makes perfect sense. On that topic as well, having worked in different sort of countries, do you find that your ability as a scout, or let's say as a youth developer or a player developer, do you find that is affected by different cultures in football or culture within people?
100%. Yeah. If it was by, and that's the truth, right? If it was just by population or how many people you have in your country, China and India, they would have the best national teams in the world, right? Yeah. So even though they're passionate, China is been trying to involve it in India, and also they're passionate for the game. Mm-hmm. But culture-wise, football is not the main sport, right? Soccer. So when you go to countries like let's go to a small country, low population like Croatia in Europe and Uruguay in South America, you see how much the culture aspect is so important for those countries be such a world power, right? For Uruguay has 6 million people, 3 million men. and they develop so many players, right?
Yeah.
Then you carry this passion to Brazil, with 200 plus million people, where football is a religion for a country, right? So Italy, Germany, it's you go to Africa, where this cultural aspect is also very important. So
Yeah.
this is why USA is an enigma, right? On a good way. This is why when I came to this country 25 years ago for the first time, I saw right after the 1994 World Cup that Brazil won, um, a country like US with 50 different, I say that US is a continent with 50 different countries inside this continent, right? On the other side, US is a country, 50 different states with different cultures, different profiles of immigrants. Every regions of the states has a different immigration. Like if you come to California, it's a big immigration from Mexicans, from Central America, and also from Indians and Asians. If you go to Florida, it's a lot of South Americans. So when you bring off, you have a big African American community. When you bring all these different DNAs, all these different profiles, you can engage those younger Americans on the football culture, not the American football, but our football, soccer.
Yeah.
You're able to develop different kinds of players. You can have an athletic winger, you can have a technical midfielder, you can have a physical center back. So here the thing is identify those players at a younger age. We know that American football and basketball are the biggest sports here. Soccer is coming along to get in their space, so when you bring those players at 7, 8, 9 years old, you kind of engage them on a very good development environment.
Yep.
US has everything to become a world power. It's already showing with the number of players that are already being transferred from MLS to Europe. You just saw like American players being transferred by 10, 12, 13 million dollars. Ricardo Pepe was just sold to Augsburg in Germany for $18 million. Daryl Dike was sold to England for $10 million. You have Christian Pulisic, being one of the main players for Chelsea. So all of these different profiles, and also the young generation of players, all the investment the MLS has put in, also the MLS clubs has put inside their academy, gonna make the US, in the next years, become one of the, it's already a top 10 national team in the FIFA ranking.
Yep.
And the national team has an average age of 20, 21 years old, 22 years old. So it's a huge amount of good younger players coming in the pipeline. So this is why the culture aspect for me, they're so important on the players not only identification but also on a player's development.
Beautiful. I mean, I guess the thing is, in Australia, we've got a very similar setup to what you guys have in the States. I guess the biggest difference for us here is firstly the population. You guys have a larger population, probably a larger pool of players, and also I guess having had kind of like that national league, MLS, more of like a structured competition. We haven't had a regular structured competition up until I believe the early 2000s. We had something there in place. We did have something previously. However, when you're talking culture, you're thinking a lot of segregation between teams, lots of politically driven teams. So it makes the development of the individual quite hard. But absolutely, I mean, I know exactly what you mean when you're saying, lots to choose from. People obviously have the big American dream. They come from all sorts of different countries, and to have somewhere where they can thrive and become the best players they can be. I mean, that's wonderful. In terms of scouting or following a player's development, do you have a particular approach or a particular process?
Yes, like myself, when I'm watching a player, that's a question that a lot of people ask me. What do I see on a player? I think the first touch on the player is fundamental. You see how technical the player is. Also, the physical attributes. When I say physical attributes, I'm not saying about being strong. It's about how agile, how smart is the player movement on and off the ball. That's also soccer IQ, football IQ. his passion also, it's for the game, his engagement on training, his engagement on the field. You know, how does the player understanding and play without the ball? Because if you look at the numbers, out of 90 minutes of a game, some players are gonna touch the ball maybe for 50 seconds, 1 minute, a minute and a half. So it's also very important to understand his role, not only offensively but also defensively, right? But those are steps that you're going to start learning, right? At a younger age, you just got to give the freedom. You're going to understand the first touch, his awareness, and also how smart he is on his decision making, and that's also very important to understanding. You know, what am I going to do even before I receive the ball? And that's also something I noticed. And we just recruited a player to our second team, and that's a kid I was watching. You know, and people doesn't realize how, even though it's not as big as the other sports, the college soccer is still providing some good talents.
Yep.
To MLS. Two of the last biggest sell from MLS to Europe were from players who were drafted in college. Tajon Buchanan, that was sold to Bruges in Belgium for 7 million euros, and Daryl Dike. Those were all draft picks. The captain from our team today, Jackson Yu, was also a draft pick. So I was watching one play and I saw this guy. I couldn't see if he was a left or right foot because he could manage both feet pretty well. For 20 years old, that has an amazing physical profile. Technically, is good. He can go outside or inside with the same facility. Be able to cross with his left and his right. Those are technical attributes that you don't see many players. So when I saw this, I saw something different. We brought this kid and to our second team, and you can see he's a potential player for the future. So also doesn't matter how old you are. Like every player has their own time to develop it.
Yep.
Right. Some players are early bloomers. Other players are late bloomers. And we, as a scout, we have to understand and be able to see up front if those players. It's the typical when I do a lot of speeches all over the world, and I have a slide on my presentation that our job is to notice the unnoticeable, understanding and see something that nobody else is seeing, and believe on their gut feeling also. Don't be scared to, if you see something different on a player, just go for it, right? Don't be concerned if someone else has a different insight on the player. Someone else told something different about the player. And something I learned, and I always get it, of course, not always, but 90% of the times I went with my instinct and my experience, I got it right.
Yeah.
So that's the advice that I give to a scout. You know, someone that knows the game, understands the game. If you see something different on a player, just stick to your guts and bring the information inside the club and say, look, this player is good on this, and this, and make the coach and the staff be aware of what you saw different on the player.
Yep. Makes a lot of sense, actually. How heavily do scout reports impact the decision of a club to sign a player, and also whether or not they promote a player to the first team?
We know how much the analytical part has taken some part also of this process. Even though I'm someone that I like to balance all the information that I get it. When you talk about data science, when we talk about analytical and numbers, you can't measure character. You can measure a lot of things from a player that are very important, and they're fundamental for a player's success. Mm-hmm. On the other side, you can understand and create your own KPIs, your key performance indicator by position. Based on this KPI, you're going to understand your game model. You're going to understand how to play. You're going to be able to filter those information with your data science, with your analytical team, then create a benchmarking by position and filter those information, because you got to use those informations to bring me, Bruno, these are the 20 best left center back under 23 in South America today.
Yep.
Then I go with my experience, with my eyes, with my knowledge. Then I analyze the players, and we are able to measure those things. On the other side, I can see a player that sometimes he can't fit the filter or the analytical filter that we have it, but I saw something different on the player. I analyze why he's not doing too good on certain KPIs. Might be by the game model, might be by their coaching, might be by the position he's playing, might be by, there's many factors you have to understand. So everyone is trying to bring those big data numbers, mix those information with the human eyes, with the holistic experience, and filter those informations, put those reports together, so the technical staff, the sporting director can make the best decision, when you're going to sign a player. So there are many processes you got to go through before making a final decision. But as I said, I always stick a lot to my gut feeling, to my knowledge, and to the benchmark that I have created to myself and with my experience, and also understanding the reality of the league, understanding how much you're going to be paying for that player.
Yeah.
And based on also on our salary cap, I got to understand what it's good for me, for how much I'm going to be spending. So it's like of the cost and benefit of the situation.
Sure. Completely understand. You mentioned obviously the biggest thing that we can measure is the on-field performances. So where numbers are involved, you can easily track it. On the topic of that though, do you often consider off-field factors for players and how that might impact their performance?
100%. When you bring a player from out of the country to a new culture, to a new locker room, different style, you got to be able to support and surround these players with a lot of care. This is why every club should have a care department to receive the players, to understand what are their needs for their families, for their kids, also be able to engage those players inside a healthy locker room, where he's going to be able to provide everything we saw on him and to perform. I always say that an airplane on the ground and a player without performing, you are losing money, because it's a business on a good way. When you buy a player for 6, 7, 10, $15 million, they need to perform.
Yep.
So it's important for a club to provide all the tools for those players be able to feel safe, feel love, and feel engaged with the whole environment, so they can perform inside the field. So the technical staff, the care department, myself as a chief scout, so we all try to make the best environment possible for the players when they come to our club.
Yeah, I think everything you're saying is super important. I myself am a coach. We coach at the highest youth league here in Australia, and one of the things the club has implemented is a welfare officer for the young kids, because as you might know already, a lot of kids don't want to talk to their coaches, might not be able to talk to their parents about things they're having, any problems they might be having. So I think when you start to notice players are not performing up to their normal standard, you usually can pick that something is going on, but you don't know what, but it's not football related. I think being able to offer that safe space for them to fix the problems that they're having, I think it's vital for ongoing development.
100%.
Bruno, in terms of your opinions on whether scouts can actually see into a player's future, there's always been a discussion amongst within the football community, I suppose, of potential ability versus current ability. Should scouts, in your opinion, assess whether a player has the potential to be a professional or be a great player, or should they focus on their current ability and how they can improve that?
Well, of course, when you see a player, you always like to, as a scout, you always like to create a benchmark on who does he look like, who is he similar with, he reminds me of this player, right? And so you can create benchmarks, you can visualize the player like where he's going to be in the future without putting too much pressure, because every country in the world has a new Neymar, has a new Messi, has a new Pelé, has a new. So we got to be very careful when you bring those situations. So when I see a player, I try to make relations with the players. Like if I have a player in my academy, I like to relate him with a player from my first team, right? So we don't create too much expectations. Then you can you can give the tools for the players to help him become a better player.
Mhm.
Of course, I was very fortunate, as I told you, to participate in the recruitment process of players such as Vinicius Junior when he was 12 years old, 13, Neymar, Coutinho. But those players, I'm not going to be here throwing things. Those players were already different at 12 years old, 13. You could see, right? I was talking to, I remember when I watched Vasco da Gama in Flamengo in 2012. I was the chief scout for the youth national team, and there was a U13 game. Paulinho was playing as a winger for Vasco da Gama, and Vinicius Junior was playing for Flamengo. And those two players were very different, right? And Paulinho was sold to Bayer Leverkusen, and Vinicius Junior is just, was sold to Real Madrid, just blossom right now. Same thing happened to Neymar and Coutinho when they play against each other. Um, so those players, they are born with this quality, this ability, and you could see they're going to be high level players right on the spot. On the other side, you have players like Fernandinho that I had the pleasure to watch him play when he was 17 to 18 years old. A kid coming from another club to Paranaense, Atlético Paranaense. We brought Fernandinho for a tournament in Ireland, Milk Cup, North Ireland in Belfast. That was 2003. And we could see that Fernandinho had the ability. He was a number 10. We play him as an 8 and as a right back. And you see Guardiola is playing him as a holding midfielder for the last 6, 7 years. And that's a late bloomer. That's a player that at 18, 19 years old. He was not a big star, but he became the player he became today.
Yeah.
Casemiro was the same thing, right? So there is a difference between a player that he's going to be good, but he reached a very high level, and a player that he's already going to be a big stars like the ones that I told you right now.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. On the topic of Brazil, obviously, some of the most talented players of all time. We think about players like Pelé and the original Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Rivaldo, Roberto Carlos. We're naming just a few there. Now, in terms of players like that, you did mention, obviously, you can spot the players that really have the ability, and then it's just a matter of them becoming who they're destined to be. Do you think that it is possible that there have been other players throughout the generations who have been just as good as, let's say, someone like Ronaldinho, but who fell through the cracks of the scouting system?
100%. And there's also players who are better than those guys, and they just for external situations they didn't make it on a higher level, right? On Ronaldinho generation, if you go look and watch it, the 1997 under 17 Brazil World Cup champion, Brazil won the under 17 World Cup championship 1997. There was a player called Matusalem, number 11 from Brazil. He was people. Ronaldinho was already different, but people had Matusalem as another top player. But for certain reasons, he played in Italy, he played in Europe for a long time, but he didn't become the player people expected, right? On the other side, there was a generation, Marcelo generation, that I had the chance to work with, the 1988 born generation. We lost the World Cup final to Mexico under 17. They had Carlos Vela, Gio dos Santos. We had Marcelo, Renato Augusto, and there was a player called Ramon. Ramon was a phenomenal. He was better than any other player from that generation, and he was sold to Russia to Lokomotiv, but for some external issues, he didn't become the big star that everybody expected, right? So this is why the mental part it's so important. The social part are so important on those process. And of course, we knew that Neymar, that Coutinho, that Vinicius, they had the quality and potential to become a big stars, but they also need a structure, from the agents, from their family, a support surrounded them, so they didn't lose their way through the process, right? And it's happened now with another kid in Brazil. I'm sure that with internet today, the information just flies, right? Yeah. There is a kid in Brazil called Hendrick today that just won the Copa São Paulo today for Palmeiras. He's a 2006. He's only 15 years old. And you can see all the pressure. He was just selected the best player for Copa São Paulo. They're saying that Real Madrid and Barcelona are already coming crazy to buy him. If this kid doesn't have a good mental structure, a good help from the people that are surrounding him, he's either going to become a next big star from Brazil, or he's going to lose himself through his way. So this is the hard part, manage those expectations on such younger players. That for myself as a Brazilian, and we know that for a South American player, they're throwing all the responsibility to give a better life to their family on their shoulders. Different from Australia, different from the USA, where if they become a professional player, oh, amazing, that's fine. If they don't become, they have education, they have a degree, or they have families that are going to support them to do something else, right? While in South American, in African and other countries, they don't have other chance besides become a professional player.
Yeah, absolutely. We see a lot of that here in Australia too. We get a lot of players who come in who have the desire, but they kind of hit that wall of development where they don't go any further. And that's purely because they are too comfortable. They are not under all the pressure of providing for family. Because I guess the thought there with a lot of players, like players from Africa, from South America and Brazil, if they make it, their families make it, and they're able to, pick their families up out of poverty. And I think it's a good driving factor. But as you said, if you're putting that pressure on someone who's 15, 16,
it is.
It's hard.
Just great. And it's just an example of this kid, because what happened is the recruitment and scouting starts such a younger age that when you talk about scouting today and bring the player inside already like a pro environment, we're talking about 7, 8, 9 years old, right? And they're kids. And the big question was like Hendrick as an example. That's a player that was, look how crazy it is, because this thing just came out in Brazil right now. So he was from Brasilia, right? The capital of Brazil. So middle of Brazil. Mm-hmm. They don't have big clubs in Brasilia. So usually they go to Rio, to São Paulo, to the bigger clubs, players, like good players. So São Paulo, the club, identified Hendrick when he was 8 or 9 years old. Wow. And he was too young. So he started coming to São Paulo to train twice a year, 3 times a year. At 11 years old, his dad was a poor guy. He doesn't have any conditions. So he said, so look, São Paulo, take me. But I need a job, right? I can't just leave, let him go alone. And São Paulo said, no, we cannot take you. We cannot, what I can give you is, I think, like $30 per month, right? $20. And the dad said, look, I can't, right? So he went back to Brasilia, and Palmeiras identified him. When Palmeiras saw his talent at 12 years old, Palmeiras gave a job to his dad inside their academy to be a cleaner inside the academy, so they could have Hendrick with them. Look how such a decision that you make it, you either gonna lose a $40 million player like he's today at 15 years old, or for $30 per month, you're gonna let this player go. This is what happened with this kid, right? And it happened with other players. So as an academy director, as a chief scout, as someone that are responsible to make the decision, and I was academy director for Fluminense. When you work inside a club, you got to be very smart on what kind of decision you're going to make it, so you don't lose this kind of opportunity. And of course, now that the kid is blossom, all those things are going to start coming. And the thing is, São Paulo let it go a player for $20 per month, and Palmeiras got an asset that is worth today at least 40, 50 million euros. So it's just crazy how those situations and how you gotta be very sure. Of course, you're not gonna get it. You're not gonna get it right 100%. It's impossible.
Yep.
But you gotta be very assured on your process when you're gonna make a final decision if a player is gonna stay or not, on what kind of help you're gonna give to the player and what you're not gonna give also the financial help to a kid, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think they're all valid, very valid points. And yeah,
Yeah.
parents need to be alongside their kids, and kids need their parents, especially in those formative years. So
Yeah.
yeah. In terms of scouting, we'll switch it to a bit of an Australian focus. I don't know how much experience you have with Australian players or with the Australian game, but we often hear here in Australia that Australian players struggle going over to Europe to find a club. And the word usually is that there is a perception about Australian players that they work very hard, that there is some ability, but they just don't fit into that system. Do you have any thoughts about this?
Oh, I think Australia always had a very good youth national teams, right? That's so why those players they don't translate to the full national team, right? That's a question. That's a question. You guys got to make it internally. You know, if you have a good under 17, you see Australia always perform well on the under 17 World Cups. You know, also sometimes on the U20. Australia has a professional league now that has similar approach than MLS.
Yep.
Australia it's a country with a very good weather where you can play a year round. So that's also very important to develop players. For me, futsal it's fundamental for players' development. Futsal it's very important for us in Brazil, and I think Australia should use this foundation of the futsal more to develop more technical players.
Sure.
If you have a stronger league, naturally you're going to have a better national team because you're going to have better players. And of course, it's always important to export players to better leagues so they can develop themselves. And that's something that MLS is trying to do, you know, and the clubs selling players to Europe and also keep a good core of players here to have this kind of mix. But I think Australia player, I was analyzing an Australian center back that he just moved to Columbus Crew. I don't know if you saw, he was in Red Star. Dejanev, I think, center back.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, he's a Serbian Australian, right? And he plays for the Australian national team. So that's a player I always receive information on Australian players. We always looking over Australian players for sure. We didn't have an Australian player in our team yet, but for sure that's a league that I'm start to looking even closer and also analyzing, because a player doesn't matter where he's from, right? Doesn't matter if he's from Congo, from Bolivia, or from Australia, whatever. If you're a good player, you're going to be a good player. It doesn't no matter where you're from, right? That's how I see it. So if you're a good player, I wanted the best player with me. It doesn't matter where he's from.
Yep, absolutely. When do you think youth should go overseas?
Youth?
Yeah, so let's say young players who, let's say they're a young American boy, 17 years of age, he's been playing in academies, but wants to try and make it in Europe. When do you think is an ideal time to try to go overseas to land a contract?
But when you say about, that's what I tell everyone, right? When you talk about Europe, Europe has 50 countries, right? So you got to be more specific. And I tell this in Brazil, and I tell this here, right? Oh, he's going to go to Europe. Okay, with all the respect, right? If he's going to go to a middle, lower level league, there is no reason for him to go, right? When you talk about Europe, you got to talk about, of course, the top 5 leagues in Europe, right? Spain, France, England, Germany, right? Those are, of course, Holland, Belgium, there is Portugal. There is probably, 10 to 12 leagues, there is a good level, and also development level. So this is why I tell the guys here, right? Why are you going to leave MLS to go for a league that you're not going to have the same kind of engagement, the same kind of development? So if you're 18 years old, there is an opportunity for you to go. And MLS start this process right now and I think it's a trend right now. They saw the quality of the players that are being developed here. And usually the American players, they have dual citizenship, what is also important and helps this kind of transition. So I don't think there is any specific age, but I think between 18 and 23 years old, some players, they are late bloomers, so they need a little bit more time.
Yep.
Other players are already ready to make the jump. So it's a matter to understand and respect the time for each player.
Absolutely. Bruno, last two questions. Is it easy being a scout? And do you need to understand football at an intimate level to be a good scout?
Yes. You gotta know about the game. You gotta know tactically, technically, also understand about training. There is a lot of things that I think we should have more specific scouting course. We have today there is one organization that I know pretty well, the PFSA, that's a Professional Football Scouting Association, who I'm a very good friend of David, who is the founder of the organization. But I think every country should be more organized regarding a specific scouting course to develop scouts. Some countries, they demand to have a coaching license, but that's an argument I had here inside US Soccer. And I told them, look, you can't demand someone to become a scout to have an A license. Doesn't make any sense, right? Because you're either going to be a coach or you're going to be a scout. Of course, you must have coaches' principles. You have to understand, but those principles should be attached inside a scouting course, right? This is why the PFSA, they're very good on this. Like myself, yes, I have done some coaching course to learn, but I'm a sporting director. I have a license for sporting director in Brazil. I have a license for football management in FIFA. I have a license from the Professional Football Scouting Association, right? I don't have an A license in coach or a pro license. I don't want to become a coach. And I know the coach principles. I know I participated in many summits about it, but I think those are two different things. The principles, they should be, yes, attached on the coaches and the scouting license. What I think is that football associations, Australian Association, the Brazilian Association, and other associations, they should be able to create it, a pipeline where they're going to be able to develop specific scouts or someone that want to only be working as a scout.
Yep. Beautiful. And lastly, in terms of the future of scouting, what are your opinions on the direction that the profession is going? And I mean that in terms of the way technology is coming about.
Living in the Silicon Valley like I do here, we know how important it is to have also the understanding, the knowledge of the numbers. I think the data person can walk side by side with the holistic person and also someone that can understand also the numbers. Of course, I understand about the numbers. I know what is important, which my KPIs are, and also we can put aside the 20 plus years that I have watching players and games. And when I bring those informations together, those knowledge together, that makes myself more comfortable to make a final decision on a player, right? So I try to always become a better professional, to always learn. I'm very humble on this. I'm someone eager to learn every day, to learn from other people, to also understand how much the data are going to be able to help my work. And then I can use this information to, as I told you since the beginning, to create this benchmarking inside my head and myself and my inner. And I think every scout, they should create their inner understanding how to read the game, understanding what kind of players succeed in the league, what kind of players succeed inside their club, right? My club, every club have their own culture. every fans, that's something unbelievable that I noticed and I learned early. If I go to Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, the players that Botafogo developing are different from the ones that Flamengo develop, different from the ones that Fluminense develop, and different from the ones that Vasco da Gama develop. I told those 4 clubs because all four clubs are in Rio de Janeiro, right? So every country, every club has their own culture.
Yep.
Every country has their own style of play. Every club has their own profile of players they're going to be developing. So every scout, they all should engage in on navigated in different aspects of the game, right? If he works for São Paulo, he's going to have a different profile of players to analyze. If he works for Manchester City, it's another profile of play. If he works for Manchester United, it's a different class of players. So be able to, as I said, to navigate in different scenarios, gonna make you a better scout for sure.
Yep, excellent. Bruno, that's all the questions we've got for you tonight. We thank you very, very much for your time. It was an absolute pleasure chatting to you, and thank you for all the information and all your advice and all your wisdom. And we hope to chat again to you soon.
No, appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to be here, to change and to also. One thing I learned in life is you don't have to hold all your knowledge, your whatever you know. You gotta just be able to exchange this information with everyone. And I'm someone very open to engage with people. I'm going to leave my Instagram here also. And also whoever want to reach out to me, it's Bruno Costa 80, Bruno Costa 80. Also my LinkedIn, if you go Bruno Costa, head of scouting, you guys are going to be able to see me there. So I'm always open to engage with people, to engage with coaches, and open to share my, everything I have learned. Yep. And I still have a long way to go. We're always learning. So thanks for the opportunity. It's always a pleasure. And, hopefully I'm going to have a chance to come to Australia as soon as possible.
Fingers crossed. We'd love to have you here. I think as soon as COVID kind of gets lifted, we even hope to maybe get over to the States there and see what football's like over there as well.
Oh, always welcome.
Beautiful. So guys, as Bruno mentioned, we will link all of his social media and his pages to the post when we get the video up. So feel free to reach out if you do want to chat to Bruno about anything. As you guys have seen, immense experience, and obviously an absolute pleasure to talk to, and very approachable. So guys, thanks again for joining us for another Australian Football Services podcast. And until next time, you guys take care. See ya.
Appreciate it.